Hey everyone, I put this video together today as an introduction to some of the common poses you'll see in pretty much all of my classes. So the goal being here to spend a little more time on these poses, to give you some extra instruction, to talk through what you might be feeling in these poses, and to give you some things to think about. So as with any flow, any class, my only rule is that you listen to your body. So if there's a pose that does not feel good, it causes pain or discomfort, back on out of it. Please do not push through it. And remember that every pose is not for everybody. And that's okay. There are so many variations of these poses that we can find the right one for you. So all you really need is some space to move around. So yourself, if you have a yoga mat, that's great. You can grab that too. And otherwise, I would love to hear your feedback on this, if this type of video is useful, what you thought, how you felt. So feel free to reach out to me on social media and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, so to start off with some of the more common poses, we'll start with Tadasana, mountain pose. So mountain pose is basically standing up straight. You can bring your feet together, maybe big toes to touch, or you can keep your feet under your hips, whatever feels better for you. Hands are by your sides, palms facing forward, and even here, thinking about keeping shoulders down and back, and core nice and tight. So think about if you were going to laugh, that type of contraction is what we want in your abdomen area. So moving on from here, to extended mountain, everything stays the same except arms rise overhead, palms facing each other, maybe pinkies twirling a little in. Even here, again, still concentrating on keeping your core tight. We don't want to give up the midsection and create an exaggerated arch in our back. So midsection stays tight, glutes are turned on, and arms overhead. From here, moving into forward fold. Biggest thing here is to hinge at your hips. So if you slow it down a little, your butt shifts back and knees might bend as you drape your torso over. What I want to avoid is the arching of your back. So here I'm folding, or I'm bending through my spine rather than hinging at my hips. So hinging is surprisingly hard, especially when you're focusing on it. So my biggest points on this, butt sits back and lean over, thinking about keeping your belly close to your thighs. Hands may or may not reach the ground, and that's not the point of this pose. So wherever your hands are is fine. And here you should start to feel just some gentle stretching and lengthening through your back. Now, moving into halfway lift. A halfway lift, hands come to shins or thighs, does not matter. And the biggest part here is to flatten out your back. So here, think about drawing your shoulder blades down and in. If we call it flattening out the back because that's the visual that it looks like if you're looking at someone else. So where naturally you might have a C shape to the top of your back, what we're looking to do is take that curve out. So lifting up through the chest, shoulders come back and squeeze in like you're bringing your shoulder blades together. For both halfway lift and forward fold, you want your weight to be towards the front of your foot. So think about in the balls of your feet. And you can always feel free to keep a bend in your knees. The idea for forward fold and halfway lift to a lesser extent is to stretch through the hamstrings. And hamstrings are basically the muscles on the back of your thigh, back of your leg. And when you're getting a good stretch in them, you should feel it in the belly of the muscle. So that's right about here, right in the middle. If you start to feel stretching and pain right behind your knee, that is not good. That's not the stretching we're looking for. So bend your knees a little bit. You can widen your feet if that's more comfortable. But really, where we're trying to feel the stretch is right in the center of your hamstrings. All right, so coming back to halfway lift, hands come to shins or thighs, back is flat. And then coming into high plank. So from here, plant your hands and step back to high plank. So you're on your toes here. You can drop your knees. Dropping your knees in any pose is absolutely awesome. So always listen to your body on this. For high plank, whether you're on your knees or your toes, think about puffing up through your shoulder blades a little bit, squeezing your glutes and your core. So we're looking to avoid letting your stomach fall towards the floor, and we're also looking to avoid butt coming up and back. So high plank, you're trying to keep yourself in almost as straight of a line as possible. From here, lowering down to your belly. Hands can stay where they are. Untuck your toes. And moving into baby cobra. So for this, your chest rises just a little bit off of the mat and pressing in to the mat with the tops of your feet. So notice that this changes the level of my thighs. They're now lifting off the mat a little. So where you want to get most of your lift from here is your back. So if I was to let go of my hands, I should be able to keep my back in the same spot. So you don't want to be pushing with your hands. You want to be using your posterior chain, your back extensors, glutes, to be lifting up. You do not have to lift far. We're just looking for a little bit of lift. If instead you're doing upward facing dog, the basic pose is the same, except now we are pushing up with our hands. They stay under our shoulders, and our hips lift off the ground as well. So things to think about here is to keep your shoulders engaged. We don't want you to sink into your shoulders. We want to keep everything active. So thinking here, pushing is kind of pushing up, but you're really engaging your lats here, and then drawing your shoulders back to open up through your chest. Gaze can be right in front of you. You don't necessarily want to be looking up to strain your neck, and that also adds more pressure in your low back. If this feels uncomfortable in your low back, just come on back down to baby cobra and use this pose as your base. And from here, moving into downward facing dog. Tuck your toes, push up and back. So hips are pointing towards the ceiling, or rising towards the ceiling. And if this is your first time here, you can pedal out your feet just to get a little movement, a little extra stretch here. If your heels don't come to the mat, that's fine. You can just keep stretching them towards them. But check in with your hands as well. You'll notice that sometimes your fingers might tent up, so your knuckles come off the mat. You want to press your knuckles into the mat so that your whole hand is grounded, all of your fingers, your whole palm. And think about jazz hands with your fingers. So you want to take up space and make this take up the most surface area as possible. Now, checking in with shoulders and torso, your gaze should be coming back towards your thighs, and think about externally rotating through your arms and shoulders. So shoulders kind of scoop down and back, and your elbow pits start to come towards the front. And take a breath here. So in classes, when we're linking poses, sometimes you'll hear right leg or left leg lifts. So for right leg lifts, you're bringing your foot up behind you, and you want level here, it's super common to kind of open your hips to the right at this point. So think about dropping your right hip and taking a look at your right toes. So you want your toes to be facing the ground, maybe even twirling it so your pinky toe is facing the ground. And pausing here. Now, the next step is usually to bring your foot in between your hands. So you can do this in one motion, or you can come to your knee and bring your foot through. However many motions you need to use is perfectly fine. So since I'm on my knee here, we'll go into low lunge. So low lunge is torso rises and arms rise overhead. So thinking about two 90-degree angles here with your legs, 90-degree here, 90-degree here. Your toes can be tucked or untucked. Keeping your toes tucked will give you a little more balance or control. And here you want to think about squeezing your inner thighs together and keeping your glutes turned on. The more you squeeze into your left butt cheek in this case, the more you'll open your hip flexors. So this is low lunge. If we come up off our back knee, this is high crescent lunge. So low lunge is always a variation of this, so if you ever need to drop to your knee, please feel free to do so. So for here, the biggest things are you want your hips facing front. So again, as you move into this pose, you might find that your hips open to the side. So think about drawing your left hip forward and right hip back so that your hips are now facing front. Arms stay overhead, and think about squeezing your inner thighs together here for both balance and strength. Keeping tension helps with both of those things. So, if we were to move into the warriors, warrior one, back heel comes down, your stance stays about the same length. Your back heel comes down and your toes face away from your body, maybe about 45 degrees, really whatever's comfortable for you. You still want your hips to face forward, and this might be uncomfortable with the different foot position. So if you need to, you can walk your front foot out to the side to give yourself more space to move your hips. Arms stay overhead again, and this is warrior one. Shoulders back and down, arms overhead, bending into front knee, back heel down. Now, if you're moving into warrior two, our back foot now goes parallel to the back of the mat, so fully to the side. And our front foot walks to center. So basically, if you were to draw a line from your front heel to your back foot, you want the line to intersect right at the center of your back arch. Bend in to your front knee, and arms come out by your sides. Even here, think about keeping your glutes turned on to keep your hips underneath your shoulders, and shoulders coming down and together. So now, moving into reverse warrior. For this, flip your front palm and draw your front arm up and behind you. You'll start to feel a stretch in your front side body, and your back arm can either come down your back leg or reach behind the small of your back, whatever feels better to you. Keep bending into your front knee. It's going to want to unbend, and that's natural, but try to fight it. Moving in to extended side angle. Front arm comes down, front elbow comes to front thigh, and back arm comes up and overhead. So our feet are staying at the same place for all of these poses right now, which is awesome. Think about one line of energy from your top fingertips to your back foot so that you're trying to create a straight line with your body. And the other big thing to think about here is to keep your front shoulder drawing back. As you settle onto your thigh, it's common to collapse into your front shoulder. So re-engage, try not to rely on holding yourself up with your thigh. Use your core still, and breathe here. Now, keeping our feet where they are, moving into reverse triangle. So this time, front leg straightens, your hips stay open to the side, but bump towards your front heel, and your front hand palm faces up and comes back behind you. So again, very similar to reverse warrior, just with the straightened front leg. It's a little bit nicer, in my opinion, because you're giving your thigh a break. And then coming into triangle pose. So for here, hands come through center, like warrior two. And then tip yourself forward with just your torso. If you're feeling tight, you'll already start to feel this in your hamstring. And then start to bring your hands to 12 and 6. So, things to think about here. It is not about how far you reach down, and you're really trying to keep your body as flat as possible. So if you were doing this pose and you had a pane of glass in front of you and a pane of glass behind you, you wouldn't touch either of them. So if you're shooting your butt back to try to get more coming down further, that's not what we're looking for here. So keep glutes engaged as you turn down. This is about as far as I get naturally, and I always put a small bend in my front knee as well. It bothers my ankle a little bit to keep it straight, so always feel free to have that option as well. If you have blocks or something that you can put your hand on to give yourself some more stability without touching the ground, that's always an option as well. Moving in to easy twist. So from here, torso comes up, spins towards the front, and left hand comes to the ground. Right foot stays where it is. Back heel comes up, and right arm lifts towards the sky. So same idea here as the lunge. You still want to be engaging your inner thighs, keeping your hips square to the front, and the twist coming through your torso. So the goal is not to open up through your hips. It's to just gently open through your chest and turn towards the right. And then bring your hands back down for runner's lunge. So runner's lunge is more or less a transitory pose. Your hands come to the mat, your foot is in between your hands, and your back heel is up. So one more pose that I want to go over is Warrior 3, because it seems appropriate since we talked about the first two warriors. So Warrior 3 is a hard one. It's a balancing pose, and you're balancing on one foot. I'm on my right foot. Left foot comes out behind, and arms come overhead. Now you have a bunch of different options for your arms. You can bring your arms back like an airplane. You can bring your arms or hands to heart center. If you want, you can bring your hands down to the mat, or you can hold on to your own ankle. Whatever makes you most comfortable and most stable. So here, just like lifting our leg in downward facing dog, we want to keep our hips even, but we want to get our leg as high as possible. So you want to be squeezing through your butt cheek as much as possible. Toes pointing towards the floor, and arms wherever you choose to have them. So that is my basic rundown of some of the poses that you'll see in classes. There are plenty more poses that you will encounter, and I will always try to describe and give as many variations as possible throughout classes. These ones you can expect to see on a fairly regular basis, and let me know what you think. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear back from you. So feel free to message me on social media, email me, whatever. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to see you in class at some point. So thanks for watching.